Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the second video in a series that I'm doing going over my personal top 10 champs of every class. We just got the science one done. Today we're moving on to skill. I mentioned this in the last video. These are not easy to do, and they are sort of an imperfect format because the game is so complicated. I started thinking I would just do like a top 5, and then I looked at those champions and I was like, I'm missing so many. So I expanded to top 10, and even with top 10, I could easily come up with 10 or 15 additional honorable mentions just because there's 250 champs, man. These classes themselves are very stacked. So I had to make some very difficult decisions and kind of present a list of 10 that I thought had a unique sort of composite utility. And I also really do consider stuff like the class wheel. I think the way the game is moving, it's important to think about that skill versus science relationship. And that's kind of how I made this list. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get cracking, starting off with number 10, and we will continue throughout the summer. I'm going to be releasing the rest of these videos. So coming in at number 10, I've actually got Mole Man himself. Used to be just amazing all the time because he was able to do everything at once. He was able to basically keep his shrug and the true accuracy and go into frenzy. When he went into frenzy, he would lose his shrug, but usually by that point the fight was over, and if you didn't have to worry because of the true accuracy, it just made the fights even simpler. Now that he's back to his sort of like binary form, which is like he can only be in frenzy or have the true accuracy, it's limited him a little bit, but not that much. I think people just don't enjoy playing him as much, but there are some definite diehards out there. He's got a lot of things going on between, like I said, the ability to shrug, the ability to get the unstoppable off of block, which creates openings. The true accuracy is very strong, and if you're on top of it, you can keep it up for the entire fight. And then just guaranteed crits. One of the things one of my subscribers, Ollie, reminded me recently is that against Quicksilver, guaranteed crits cannot be evaded. So like against an annoying science champion like Quicksilver, you either have true accuracy or you have guaranteed crits. So he's taken care of no matter what. I like abilities like that. He obviously has a decent amount of resistances and health. So like he is pretty good at safely taking matchups. If you do accidentally go into frenzy and you don't want to, you can kind of just wait it out. And then obviously with power back boost, he's just like a force to be reckoned with, and also using deep wounds makes him even better. So because he has all of that upside, he's decent with the recoil tree. I just think he's pretty versatile when it comes to the skill class and what he is able to do, and he does make my top 10. But the fact that he is 10, I think says a little bit about this list and who are the folks in front of him that are going to sort of take his crown away as being one of the top 3 in the past. So Mole Man is my number 10. Let's move on to number 9. At 9, I have Crossbones. Now, I have never been the biggest Crossbones fan because I personally am not that good at playing him. I feel like in order to play him well, you need to be very aggressive, stay on top of the Furies, and you also need to be doing the heavy punishes. And I've always just found that sort of the big orange numbers just haven't lined up for me when I've used him. And plus his shrug is only a flat 90%. So it's never going to be perfectly reliable. And if RNG is very bad, then you're going to have a very bad time. And it does require that Sig 200, and he's not my favorite champ to Sig 200. That said, ability to not crit, he has amazing defensive ability accuracy reduction because it can go over 100%, like negative 100%. As you build Furies, it keeps going, and there are times when you need more than 100% reduction. He can get there very, very easily. He's got those massive Furies, like I said. Big orange numbers are very nice. I just think he is a really solid champion. We've seen him used against like the Thing pretty often in Battlegrounds. He's one of the best counters there. He's pretty fast if you know how to play him. He's just not my cup of tea, which is why he's probably lower on my list than for some other people. I figure if I'm not playing him well, there's probably a lot of other players that are also struggling with him, which to me means there may be a little bit of a play style issue with him, where you do need to kind of rely on the AI and things to go your way for him to work perfectly. Whereas some of the champions that come right after him, I think rely on the AI less and they get done similar to what he is able to do. So that's why he comes in at number 9. At number 8, I have Falcon. Now, we joke about Falcon a lot because he is literally one of the most boring champions in the entire game to play. But you cannot deny what this guy can do, and it all comes down to that locked on. Dashing back and holding block. Since the buff, it's much more convenient to do that than it used to be. And just boom, 100% defensive ability accuracy for a pretty long time, for a very long time against science champions. It really comes in handy against them. He has a guaranteed crit off of the special 2. He's got a little bit of bleed. When you sig him up, he gets a lot of crit rate, which helps that guaranteed crit, and it also just gives him an attack advantage. There are more and more nodes coming out that he's able to just turn off, or champions that he's able to just turn off. Like, for example, Hulkling. Like, you can just lock on and none of Hulkling's annoying stuff will ever happen. The Thing, you know, it's not just the science champions like the Thing or, you know, Abomination or things like that you don't want to be hitting into them and getting bad effects on you. Like I said, Hulkling, even Nick Fury, like, it will not give him his tactical charges. So, like, you know, stuff like Hit Me, I Dare You, the armors, like the counter on that, anything that you do when you're hitting them, it's basically just going to turn off those abilities, and that is so powerful. There are a few things that get in the way of that. There are ways to turn off ability accuracy reduction, but time and time again, Falcon is proving that that simplicity that he has is doing plenty. We're seeing it in Battlegrounds, we're seeing it in content, occasionally even in War, and that's why he does make it this high on the list at number 8. Now, number 7, I'm going to give this one to Elsa Bloodstone, and she is either like got a cult following by some people, or she's completely dismissed. There are very few people that kind of put her in the middle of the pack. And like, believe me, she's one of my favorite champions. She's sort of the signature champ of my channel, and I'm still putting her down at number 7, but she does make my top 10. And I think that's exactly where she belongs. As things have become more complicated, as the relationship between skill and science has become more interesting, she has stood out to me as just being like old faithful. The thing I've always loved about her, and I've said this in multiple of my videos, is there's very little trade-off with her playstyle. Her utility and her damage, they're intertwined. Her damage comes from a very high crit rate. It comes from placing the Behemoth Busters, which is direct red damage that is enhanced by that crit rate, and then also incinerates. She can counter evade, she can shrug debuffs reliably without having to do anything fancy. If they're non-damaging debuffs, they will just tick off one by one as you're going. Often that's plenty to get you going, and she has a massive precision. And then you can't deny that her well-timed block evade counter thing is so important when it comes to dealing with anything from unblockable or just things where you do not want to take any blocked hits. You can stall out enough and do that firing shot into them with a well-timed block, get an easy opening. It comes in handy a lot more than people give it credit for, and it's one of the reasons that like she's pretty good at doing stuff like 0 damage take and takedowns if you know how to play her well. She's still one of the best void counters out there, and the fact that she's a 7-star with even more crit rate and even more with that precision, like she's gonna really scale well as she goes up and up and up as a 7-star. I've always liked her, and like I said, she's just like old reliable to me. There's just something about her play style that I've fallen in love with, and I hope that more people really get into her as you get to see her as a 7-star. But even for me, when you have her Sig 200 as a 6-star, the damage, those yellow numbers against Science and XL and L and the last node is just so massive. It is not to be underestimated for sure, and she is my number 7 champion, Elsa Bloodstone. Now we've got number 6, and I'm giving this one to Shang-Chi. He's a newer rank up for me, and I've always known he was good, but I've never experienced it firsthand. And now that I've played him a little bit, I've used him in a few wars, and I did use him in 8.2. I gotta say, I'm very impressed with this guy. I mean, it ends with his guaranteed crits off of that special 2 and how that can just end fights. But on the way up, if you go into any fight with a game plan about which wushu strikes you want to do when, it pretty much shuts down the fight. Like, I remember taking something that had some unblockable in it, and basically you can just spam into the block, get the stun through the block by doing a 5-hit combo, and the stun is long enough to not only land a slow by doing medium, but then you can kick them down and reset your Wushus, and you can basically play completely contactless that way. He also has the access to cleanse, which comes in handy in a number of scenarios. It's like a debuff shrug that happens like down the line, so you don't have to time it out perfectly, and that also completely turns off Jessica Jones. And I already mentioned the slow is so good, as is the unblockable. You can do 4 hits into block and then it just connects. So yeah, he is just a wonderful skill champion. He doesn't really need a sig, but it does give you a little extra red damage as well. And yeah, I'm very excited to rank him this high and to finally have him and get to use him. He's just one of the most reliable skill champions out there. It does take a little bit of finesse to play, but I do think he kind of edges out some of the other ones that I've mentioned so far, and he is my number 6. All right, so we're down to the top 5. We're going to see some new champions that have come out in the past year or so, as well as some old champions here. And I think you won't be too surprised at who they are. But when it comes to the order, I am putting Baron Zemo at number 5. Now listen, I'm going to do a little plug for this small YouTuber you may have heard of, whose name is Karate Mike. His Baron Zemo video is the most ridiculous showcase of a champion that I have ever seen on YouTube. If you are playing Baron Zemo at that level, with that synergy team, with that setup, and with that amount of skill behind it, he's the best skill champion in the game. However, I don't necessarily think for other summoners that are not named Karate Mike, those are the results that we're seeing in the community. That said, his bleeds, his ability to punish them being immune to bleed, or if they shrug stuff, the disorient, the roots. It seems like if you just do like special 2, special 1, you're in really good shape with this guy. He has the cleanses as well. I'm just getting into Baron Zemo. I know how powerful he is. Obviously, he has interesting interactions with relics as well that create additional stuns in addition to the root, etc. But man, this guy is extremely powerful. I just think that he has been shown in scenarios at his ceiling, which is not something that you can expect out of him for like average Joe MCOC playing him. And there are, I found, 4 other champions that did just sort of eke out in front of him for the top 5. That said, if you have a Zemo, if you have him ranked up, if you have him sigged up, you have a phenomenal champion there. And I think as he stays in the game, he was a little under the radar when he first came out here. I think as more people get more familiar with him, they'll find a happy medium, which isn't that like ridiculous showcase where he looks like he's a god, but that he is just a very reliable and easy to use skill champion. I think he will get there, but because of those slight caveats that I have with him, and also some of it I will admit is a slight unfamiliarity with him and only sort of like dipping my toes into the waters of Baron Zemo recently, I'm putting him at number 5. He could easily go up though. Now number 4, I'm giving this to Kate Bishop because I have seen some things with this young lady. I have seen some things. The cold snap damage is incredible. The cold snap damage alone. The perfect release is not that hard to get down. You don't have to do it in like a Battlegrounds matchup. I guess in a very long form matchup, you want to be nailing those perfect releases. You want to be stacking all of her forms. She has, in my opinion, a better Tranquilize than Mantis. Like hers is very reliable, and Tranquilize is new to the game, but I have a feeling it's going to come in handy. If they happen to have energy resistance or are cold snap immune, you use the bleed, you use the caltrops. It's just, there's something about her that, I mean, DLL designed her, so you know it's going to be a smart design. But once we've seen her implemented, we've seen her go into Abyss and absolutely wreck massive health pools. We've seen her go into Battlegrounds with those smaller health pools and have complete control over the fight, including the fact that she has the same sort of riposte mechanic that Elsa Bloodstone has, but there is a stun at the end of it. I was seeing her take down Korgs because the stun lasts longer than his unstoppable unblockable does, and she has this crazy light reach. Plus, Korg is energy resistant in the negative, so the Cold Snap was doing a ton of damage. Not to mention these are passives, right? Cold Snap passive, that's taking care of evade for the entire fight. It's ticking away. It's not going to be subject to any kind of debuff shrugging. So yeah, she looked like a really fun, interesting champ. Now that some people have their hands on her and they're using her in content and in battlegrounds and in war, holy, Kate Bishop is going to be really good for a long time. Really excited to very confidently put her at number 4. So now we got down to the top 3. And for my number 3, I'm giving it to Valkyrie. And, you know, the simplest sentence about her is that she just can KO any opponent almost by just hitting the block. And the fact that you don't have to knock down the opponent, you know, that came into handy during the Conduit season, but there's other reasons to not knock down opponents. And the fact that you're not giving them as much power and you're not interacting with any abilities that would happen when you actually hit the opponent, that alone is massive. But you know what? In most matchups, you actually can hit them and you want to hit them. So what happens if you're not just spamming hits into block? Well, let me tell you, it doesn't take that long to build up your combo, to alternate, do the reverting and the inverting of the combo so that you end up with a bunch of buffs. With Bulwark and with your Pierce buffs, you throw a special 1 first, you get a little bit of a safety net with the evade charges, and then if you know how to manipulate the AI, it's very easy to super quickly get off a special 2 safely. If you're a little less confident, you can just dance around a little bit until they're safely holding block and then do it. That'll add a couple seconds to your fight. It's not the end of the world. Most of the time, that big special 2 and the follow-up with the Fury is enough to get down any Battlegrounds opponent. And then that's before we even get to the stun immunity. There are ways to play into that, again, with AI manipulation. Sometimes when they walk right up to you and they're about to parry you, you can just start hitting them into their block and you won't get stunned. It's really good for stuff like encroaching stun, obviously. And then there's the unstoppable countering. Like, she does need to be Sig 200, but if that's the case, if you make contact with your sword with them 10 times, then unstoppable is essentially turned off for the entire fight. And this is not class-based, this is all unstoppable. So this is not just your Jessica Joneses and the Thing, you know, it's also any node that has unstoppable. It's stuff like, you know, Kingpin, if he throws a special 2, it's all unstoppable in the game. It doesn't have to be passive, it doesn't have to be active, it's just unstoppable. She's going to turn it off, and that is so powerful. The best Valkyrie players make her look absolutely amazing, but even if you're not that good with her, that unstoppable counter alone and the ability to get the special 2 on block, even if you don't build her perfectly, is enough to make her everybody's top 3 champion, in my opinion. She is my number 3. I really enjoy having a Sig 200 rank 4. Definite rank 5 candidate down the line as well. Valkyrie comes in at number 3. So we got our top 2, and I'm going to do something a little different this time because I have thought about this a lot. And now listen, I am an owner of a rank 5 Nick Fury, and there are times when you use Nick Fury to erase opponents by light and just 5 out of 5 deep wounds. That can cheese a lot of stuff in the game, and if you mess up, you get a second life, and by the way, you have a ton more damage off of that light combo. That said, I'll get to Nick Fury in a second. I'm gonna skip to number 1 and talk about them together. My number 1 is Kingpin, and it's because of this thing I've said. It's an adage I've said before. If I have to go into any fight completely blind, I'm picking Kingpin. Now, hopefully it's not a Jubilee, but if it's anybody else practically, he is so solid. He's got a ton of health. He regens all fight. His special 1 puts on a degen that basically no one's immune to, and it also has a weakness and an ability reduction component. His combat power rate is through the roof, so you always have specials. You can ramp with the special 2, throw it, you get easy openings with the unstoppable. It's that simple. And then there's stuff like Hazard Shift, right? Like, obviously he just, if there's more than 8 debuffs on him, they just go away. He doesn't even need the hood synergy for that. He can just take fights that are throwing debuffs on you. If not, if he's like Sig 65 or Sig 200, it's very easy to ramp up to overpower. He's just amazing with a little bit of that ability reduction and the tankiness and the regen that he gets. He is just, it's very, very difficult to die with him in a number of scenarios, against a number of classes, against a number of nodes. He's just always finding a way to win, and that's why he's my number one. But Nick Fury, he's more than just a nuke. He's much more than just a nuke. He has a very reliable disorient. He has the ability to turn off stuff like miss and evade. He can basically cleanse or purify all the debuffs off of him, all the non-damaging debuffs by a heavy attack. And you know, that internal bleed is pretty nice. If it's a longer fight and you can try to get the internal bleed off, then your bleed debuffs are going to be stronger, last longer as you go. So that's one way to play. And I mean, you can't say enough things about that safety net. If it's your last fight of war and you think you might die, it doesn't matter, because you could die, you shoot back up to 100% health, and he just, you know, slowly ticks down to 30. But like, if you have 30% health, you can survive for a pretty long time. So even if you get all the way down to 30, the attack boost that you have is just absolutely absurd. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, if you have the Petrify Mastery on, for example, if you parry and you hit them 4 times during that parry stun, very little power is granted, and you just get that massive bleed off of the light attack. He is a borderline broken champion in a way that I don't think Kingpin is borderline broken per se. Kingpin is just extremely strong and versatile. Because Nick Fury is also extremely strong and versatile, but also a little bit broken, it's why he's top 2. But because in a lot of matchups you're using him in the first life, you know, I would take Kingpin over first life Nick Fury. That's the main reason that he's my number 2, is because Kingpin is first life Kingpin all fight, you know, and he often doesn't enter his non-living state. He is always alive because he is so tanky and versatile in what he can do. Like, I remember taking like Mephistos in Battlegrounds with him. Like, it's just crazy stuff that you wouldn't think he'd be able to do, but he absolutely is able to, very, very safely. He also has this crazy Mr. Sinister synergy where, you know, if you do that, you can do the belly bouncing in the corner, get those big furies. They're basically power locked. So he does have access to power control on top of everything else if you have the right synergy. That does fit on war teams. I did take it to war this season as well. But yeah, those two are just such studs at the top. I don't think anyone would argue that they're not the top 2. I just happen to today, again, it's how I woke up, it's how I felt today. I put Kingpin at number 1, Nick Fury at number 2. So I'm going to end all these videos by saying, please do share your comments. I would love to have a discourse about this. This is my first time doing a series like this. Like, I may have completely missed a champion that deserves to be on this list. And even if I personally didn't put them on the list, there are certainly many, many worthy champions in like number 11 through 20 for sure that I just didn't have time to talk about today. So I do hope you enjoyed these videos. There are 4 more to go. We've done science and we've done skill so far. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that like button, subscribe, share the video if you're interested, become a member if you're really interested. I always enjoy sharing with you and talking about this crazy game that we all love. So thanks for watching it, and I'll catch you in the next one.